Hi guys, it's Jamie again. I'm back with a book haul. So these are all the books that I collected for either I got as presents for Christmas or I purchased myself before
So the first
or
books
after
I got
Christmas.
were
from, let's get started. So the first books I got are The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien. These are, of course, his stories of Middle-earth, and I have actually never read them before. I really like fantasy a lot, but they aren't something that I've read before, so I'm really looking forward to that. And I also really like these editions. I think they're really pretty. I've got a matching Hobbit one as well, and so I'm glad that these all match, and hopefully that will spur me to read these sooner rather than later. Continuing in the fantasy vein, I got a couple of books from one of my favorite video game series called Dragon Age. These are the novelizations of that Dragon Age world that I'm really excited about. I'm a huge fan of the video games, and so looking forward to reading these. The first one is Dragon Age: The Last Flight. This has to do with Templars and the Grey Wardens and Magi, and if you have played the games before, you'll know what I'm talking about. The next one I got is Dragon Age: The Masked Empire. This one has to do with Empress Celine of Orlais, basically kind of her rise to power and then how she manages to keep power when she's got a relative that's looking to take her out, basically. I'm not sure if it's a relative or not. It doesn't look like it's a relative. The next three books I bought are by the same author and actually in the same series or cycle called the Hainish Cycle, and that's by Ursula K. Le Guin. The first one I got is Worlds of Exile and Illusion. This actually is a bind-up of the first three novels of the Hainish series, and that's City of Illusions, Planet of Exile, and Rocannon's World. I actually don't really know much about this. I was planning to read The Left Hand of Darkness, which is another novel by Le Guin, but I realized that it was the fifth book in this series, even though the author herself has said that they don't necessarily need to be read all together. It's something I'd like to kind of start from the beginning and go from there. In that vein, I also got the word for world is forest. This also takes place in the same universe, and it's about kind of a peaceful planet that's been conquered by humans, not humans, but humans, and how the planet adapts to these captors, essentially, I think. I don't know a lot about it still. And then I also got The Dispossessed, and I know even less about this than the other ones, but I know that Ursula Le Guin is a very famous science fiction author, and so I'm looking forward to reading those. The next one I got is kind of different. This is The Ruby Fruit Jungle by Rita Mae Brown. This is actually a groundbreaking lesbian novel. A lot of people in the LGBT community, particularly lesbians, say that this is a really formative book, and it's kind of an introduction, was an early introduction for a lot of 40 and 50-year-old lesbian women, for a lot of 40 and 50-year-old lesbians, about what it is to be a lesbian, what it is to be gay, and so it has to do with a kind of a tomboy, basically, who kind of comes into realizing that she is different from everyone else. That's about it for what I know about it, but I really like reading LGBT books, especially ones that are very groundbreaking or that came out quite early, especially pre-Stonewall books I'm quite into, and it looks like this one came out in 1973, so this is post-Stonewall, but it's still going to be a really interesting read. The next book I got is Till We Have Faces by C.S. Lewis. This is a retelling of the story of Cupid and Psyche. It's actually told from the perspective of Psyche's sister, who kind of sets things into motion. So Psyche's not allowed to look at Cupid's face, but she does anyway and gets banished, and it seems like her sister has a lot to do with that. And so I'm really interested to see kind of how this pans out. The only other C.S. Lewis books I've read are the Chronicles of Narnia series, and those are more children-oriented, and so I'm excited to see what his more adult-oriented books are like. The next few books that I got are are part of my attempt to read a little bit more diversely this year. So I bought books from writers from countries that I haven't really read a lot of, or maybe that I have that I'd like to incorporate some more into. So in that vein, the first book I got is A Golden Age, which is a novel by Tamima Annan. She's a Bangladeshi writer, and this actually is about a widow in 1971 in East Pakistan, and I guess it has to do with the Bangladeshi War of Independence, which I actually don't know anything about. I think this will be my first Bangladeshi writer as well, so if anyone has any recommendations about Southeast Asian writers, I'm definitely really interested, so please let me know. The next writer is a Korean American writer. I read a collection of short stories by a Korean American author last year, and it was really interesting because a lot of the stories had to do with either Koreans who had recently immigrated to the U.S. or people living in Korea, or you know, somewhere that's kind of between two cultures, and I thought that was really interesting. I don't think this has a lot to do with that, but nonetheless, this is On Such a Full Sea by Chang-Rae Lee. It looks like this is a dystopian novel that's set in, I guess, Baltimore has now been called B-more, and a bunch of people from China have been moved to what was America, or maybe what still is America, because it got too polluted in China to actually live there anymore. So, so that's kind of the backdrop, and then it follows this young girl named Fawn, and Fawn is looking for her boyfriend who had suddenly disappeared. The next book I got is The Bastard of Istanbul by Elif Shafak. This follows two separate women. One is an Armenian American, and the other is a woman living in Istanbul, and kind of how their lives intertwine. This is by a Turkish author. I don't think I've ever read a Turkish author before. So. The next book I got is The Girl on the Fridge by Etgar Keret, something like that. I'm very, very sorry. This is by an Israeli author, and it's a collection of short stories. They seem to be pretty grotesque, pretty strange. The title story here is about a girl who is raised by a fridge, apparently, raised by some kitchen appliance. That's really up my alley. I like a lot of short stories, and I like the weird and grotesque ones as well, and so looking forward to reading this. And it's by an Israeli author, and I don't think I've read very many Israeli authors. The last book in this sort of push to read a little more diversely is Confessions by Kanae Minato. I've never read this before. I've read a lot of Japanese authors. I mentioned in my first video that my master's degree was in Japanese literature. It was in post-war Japanese literature, so I haven't read a lot of contemporary authors. This is about a school teacher whose daughter is murdered, and she kind of finds out how her daughter was murdered, and starts slowly taking revenge on the children who did it in a lot of really messed up ways. I think this is the one that I'll pick up next after the book I'm done reading now. The next books I got are all comic books. I'm a big comic book fan. I like graphic novels. I like those sort of more slice of life novels. And I also like Marvel Comics and DC Comics, and so it's kind of a collection of those two. The first one is Avengers vs. X-Men by a lot of people. So basically the premise of this is that Phoenix is back. If you guys watched X-Men, I think it was X-Men 3 maybe, you'll know Jean Grey and the Dark Phoenix saga, or if you watched the cartoons in the 90s, those were pretty great. So the X-Men kind of want to protect Phoenix, even though she has very deadly powers, and the Avengers want to kill her, basically. And so it means that the Avengers and the X-Men are opposed, and they fight, so that's why it's Avengers versus X-Men. One of my favorite X-Men characters is Emma Frost, who's been a pretty important character for quite a long time. I read Grant Morrison's run of X-Men, Ultimate X-Men or something like that, and Emma Frost played a big role there. I think she'll probably play a big role in this one as well. If you guys have recommendations as to what I should read after Avengers vs. X-Men, I would really appreciate it. The next collection I got is Giant Sized X-Men. This collects basically, I think, something like 5 years of Chris Claremont's run of X-Men. In 1976, I believe, X-Men was basically dead. So Stan Lee had created it in the 40s maybe, or 50s, or maybe the 60s. Stan Lee had created it at some point before that, and then it was kind of teetering on the edge of being defunct. Chris Claremont took it over and started writing for it, and that's when a lot of the things that you see now in X-Men kind of came to be. Like I said, the only X-Men I've really read is Grant Morrison's run of it, so it's always interesting to see what different authors do with the same characters. So the next comic I got is also another Dragon Age comic. I hope there are a lot of Dragon Age fans out there, otherwise I'll feel kind of lonely. That is Dragon Age, which collects the comics of The Silent Grove, Those Who Speak, and Until We Sleep. These are by David Gator, Alexander Freed, and Chad Hardin. I think they all write, at least I think David Gator is one of the main writers of the Dragon Age series. What's cool about this comic, not that I've read it yet, but it follows Alistair, Isabella, and Varric. These are all characters that you either play with or play as in the Dragon Age games, and so to kind of follow a continuation of their story in the same world is going to be really interesting. If you're into cool fantasy at all, I would recommend Dragon Age the games and then Dragon Age the comic book as well. The last comic book that I got is quite a big behemoth, and that is Strangers in Paradise. You can see that here. It's the omnibus, so it collects everything. This is by Terry Moore. It's a comic book that was released in the 1990s. I think it ran for something like 100 issues or 90 issues or something like that. It was all self-published, which is pretty cool, and it all centers around women. It actually has two main characters, Francine and Kachu, I think her name is. And Francine thinks Kachu is her best friend, and Kachu is kind of in love with Francine, and that's basically the main point of tension for a lot of the series. And it's always interesting with an omnibus, especially one that's self-published or that has one writer / illustrator, to kind of see how their writing progresses and also how their drawing style and their art progresses as well. And I think that's going to happen a lot with this, especially in such a transformative comic era as the 1990s. As you can see, the art is very pretty. Let me take out some here. It's pretty text heavy, which is always great. And the style, I think the style is really cool, and so so I'm really looking forward to reading this all the way through. Alright, that's it. I think that was 19 or 20 books altogether. A lot of them, as you can see, were pretty big anthologies. So I think I'm set for quite a while for reading. But yeah, once I read these, I'll post reviews. I'm hoping to post a lot of reviews on this channel, so if you are interested, please keep watching. Thanks very much, and I'll see you guys later.